Hello everybody and welcome to month two's content. This month we will be focusing on fixing your food intolerances and your leaky gut, or intestinal permeability as the scientific community calls it. So welcome, I am Karen Saunders, the Women's Naturopath, and I help women heal their hormonal and digestive issues. So this month I'm talking about food intolerances and leaky gut, I think because it's the most common thing that I see in clinical practice day in and day out. Most of my patients will have a degree of intestinal permeability that results in many different symptoms. So my aim is to educate people as to what these symptoms are and to help people use food as medicine and nutrients to heal themselves. So if this sounds like you, if you experience gut issues or food intolerances or some of the symptoms that I'm going to mention, then have a listen. This could be super valuable for you. Okay, kicking off, I guess a case study might be a good idea. So for example, a client might come in and their main symptoms may have acne or a skin issue or a rash or eczema, or they'll come in and they are bloated, they have anxiety, they're fatigued, their hormones have gone out the window, or they may have PCOS or endometriosis or something like that. Often this is combined with various food intolerances. It may just be one or two foods or entire food groups that people have had to cut out. Often they have a diagnosis of IBS and sent away with the FODMAP diet, which works for a little while, but then after a year it stops working and people have to cut out more and more of their foods. Now that's not an ideal way to eat. We know our gut bacteria rely on a diverse range of fibers and foods to feed and thrive. So while the FODMAP diet is indeed a therapeutic diet, which I use, it needs to be used in conjunction with gut healing nutrients and foods. All right, so if this sounds like you, have a listen. I've also created a fix your food intolerance ebook, so you can download that as well if you don't feel like listening to me talk. All right, so the first thing I think to define is the difference between a food allergy and a food intolerance. So food allergy is something that you're most likely born with. It's an immune-mediated allergy. It's an immediate response to a food allergen that you've eaten. And you'll notice straight away because you'll come out in hives and welts. It's often quite serious, like anaphylaxis. And even if you have a tiny bit of that food, you can go into that anaphylaxis reaction. Whereas a food sensitivity or a food intolerance is something that you develop over time. This is very much gut mediated, and this is due to a digestive issue. The reaction that you may get can take up to 3 days to actually have its effect. So often you may not even correlate this with foods. And the signs and symptoms are so varied, from fluid retention to welts to bloating, burping, gas, constipation, hives, all sorts of things. So if you have a true food allergy, this book is probably not going, well, this class is not going to help you. You will have to just stay away from those foods forever. Most of you, though, I'm guessing will have a food allergy or food sensitivity or two. So carry on. Now, when we have this reaction, this food sensitivity reaction, it's due to the gut being inflamed. So for various reasons, which we will go into, the gut becomes inflamed and therefore it becomes super or hypersensitive to some foods, right? So when the gut becomes inflamed, we call this intestinal permeability or leaky gut or gut permeability. Now, what is leaky gut? Basically, if you have food allergies, you can pretty much say that you have a degree of leaky gut or intestinal permeability. Leaky gut or gut permeability or intestinal permeability is when the proteins that are between the cells in the gut lining actually start to move apart and disassemble, like they lose integrity. So what happens that you end up with a porous or a permeable membrane between the gut and the bloodstream. And what happens when this is permeable, it allows certain molecules of food that wouldn't normally, or bacterial components like lipopolysaccharide, which is super toxic, to enter into the bloodstream. And of course, this is an invader in the body, and your immune cells will recognize this as such, as an invader, and mount an immune response. Sometimes it's an overzealous immune response, and sometimes it's a slow build. Regardless, because of this intestinal permeability or intestinal inflammation, your gut has become porous, and these molecules enter into the system and cause an inflammatory immune response. This could be local in the gut, or it could be systemic all over the body. So this leads to the myriad of symptoms that we're about to go through. But all you need to remember there is that leaky gut leads to food intolerances, and food intolerances further lead to leaky gut. It's like a vicious cycle. Right. Okay, so let's go into the signs and symptoms. Signs and symptoms of leaky gut obviously can be in the digestive system. So bloating is one of the biggest ones I see. Reflux, burping, burning, constipation, loose stools or diarrhea, or a variation of both. You could be getting bad breath or brain fog or fatigue, especially after eating some meals. There are some hormonal signs and symptoms, particularly things like PCOS and endometriosis. They are inflammatory, hormonal, and digestive conditions most of the time. And often that LPS that I was talking about that leaks into the bloodstream can really exacerbate those inflammatory endometrial tissues. And this is an area that I specialize in, really the link between the gut and the hormones and addressing that. Immune system symptoms such as autoimmune conditions. So there's certain autoimmune conditions that have been showed to have a link to intestinal permeability. Chronic anemias, common, so low chronic iron or low nutrients, just chronically can't get them up. That shows a degree of malabsorption. Mood issues are a big one as well. So any anxiety, depression, or just a lowered resilience to stress. Skin issues are a really common one as well. Especially those inflammatory skin conditions. It might just be something like welts or a rash, or it might be a bit more severe like eczema and perioral dermatitis. Rosacea is another one, and sometimes even psoriasis. Fluid, this is a big one. Fluid retention and an inability to lose weight can often be because your body is inflamed and allergic to some foods that you're putting into your body. So lots of signs and symptoms there. In the book, I will table it nicely so that you can use it as a guide. Usually, as a rule, I kind of think in clinic that if you have about 3 of these symptoms, it's pretty obvious that you may have some sort of leaky gut. But I will say that a large degree of my clients have got intestinal permeability, or certainly a degree, and I think most of us will go through a time in our lives where we will tend to have a more leaky gut and we're more reactive to foods. So I look at it kind of like a bucket, and when your bucket is empty, you've been eating well, you're not stressed, you're sleeping great, your bucket is empty. But then we might start to get a bit stressed, we might start to eat some inflammatory foods, and the bucket starts to get fuller, and then we eat a bit more, get a bit stressed, lose some sleep. All of a sudden we have that one croissant and the bucket just overflows, and all of a sudden you're allergic to everything. I'm like, but last week I could have broccoli and this week I can't. So treatment will always revolve around reducing the inflammatory load and healing that leaky gut. So I hope that analogy kind of paints a bit of a picture for you. What are the causes? So what are the causes? How did you get this leaky gut? Like, why is my gut inflamed? As you can imagine, there are lots of things that can cause inflammation in the gut. It comes down to a few major issues, which would be food, stress, toxins. I will mention them briefly, but again, have a look at that ebook that I've created. The main contributor to intestinal permeability, I think, is our food choices. So often we eat a lot of inflammatory foods, and I'm talking gluten or wheat, dairy, sugar, alcohol is a big one as well. So those all contribute to inflammation in the gut. Something called the SIBO is a really big one. It's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Bear in mind, when I'm talking about intestinal permeability, I'm mainly talking about this happening in the small intestine. However, this can happen in the large intestine and indeed the stomach as well. And this has slightly different causes. So SIBO as a reason for intestinal permeability. SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which means too much of a certain type of bacteria in the small intestine. Now, this is a subject on its own, which we will be going into in another class. And I do suggest, if you have SIBO, that you chat to a practitioner for treatment, because you will need some antimicrobial herbal medicine. Nevertheless, it's worth mentioning that it is a contributing factor to intestinal permeability and should be addressed. Lack of sleep or insomnia will increase this permeability. Stress, of course, will increase this intestinal permeability. I'm not talking, just a couple of days. I'm more talking about, somebody who's chronically busy or chronically stressed, which, to be fair, a lot of us are. Alcohol, which I mentioned before, is very inflammatory. Dysbiosis, which is simply an imbalance of bacteria in the large intestine. So you could have not enough good bacteria, you could have a parasite or a yeast or a bacteria that's pathogenic and producing toxins that inflame the gut. And you could have not enough beneficial to outcompete, or it could be that you have normal commensal bacteria, but they've just overgrown. So this is what we call dysbiosis. So environmental toxins are another biggie, I think. Things like pesticides and herbicides. I know Roundup or glyphosate is still quite heavily used in Australia, much to my disbelief and much to your gut bacteria's horror. Things like mold. If you're living in a moldy house, this can exacerbate leaky gut. Heavy metals, and of course, if you have any underlying inflammatory conditions, this is like type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and such. This is already underlying inflammation, which can exacerbate the gut inflammation and permeability. So what to do about it? Head over again to the ebook, because it will go into slightly more detail and you can use it as a bit of a shopping list. I have also put in for you guys a absolutely free 30-day paleo plan. Well, actually, it's a 2-week paleo plan, which you can just repeat. A 30-day paleo plan is probably my favorite way in clinic to treat intestinal permeability, just because it gives the gut a rest from a lot of allergenic foods. So this is worth around $60 and I've given it to you completely free. Paleo is a no grain and no processed foods, no dairy, no legumes diet plan, lots of vegetables, lots of fiber. So have a look at that if that's for you. I recommend, if you want to heal your gut, starting with a 30-day paleo plan. Let's see, nutrient-wise or nutrition-wise, foods to include and foods to avoid. Let's start with the avoid, and we've mentioned them before. So most definitely avoiding alcohol, especially for that first month of treatment. You'd want to avoid any excess or refined sugar. You want to avoid any gluten, wheat, dairy. Okay, these are all inflammatory foods, and if there's any inflammation setting in the gut, this has been shown to set that off. Quite a few people are gluten insensitive or intolerant, but you don't really know that because over time it just builds up and builds up. You don't really get this, crazy anaphylactic reaction. So avoid those foods and include foods like bone broth. This is super healing for the gut. Now, a caveat here, if you have SIBO or a high histamine response, you need to work with a practitioner as it gets tricky. So often we have foods that overlap on each other, and you may need some help figuring out just exactly which groups of foods are pissing off your gut. So this could be histamines or salicylates or amines. There could be a whole lot of foods that are causing this reaction and that you need to avoid. So I'm just talking quite generally here. If you know that kimchi and sauerkraut and bone broth and apple cider vinegar sets you off, you may sit in the histamine group, but then don't have those. Okay, foods for healing, of course, are going to be your bone broth. You're going to include a lot of turmeric in your diet. So something like golden milk is great, because turmeric in food as medicine goes directly into the gut and is used locally there. So you don't need any fancy absorption technology in there. You're going to include lots of polyphenols that feed your good bacteria. Now, these are the molecules that give things color, like in blueberries and red cabbage and green tea. So these all contain polyphenols. Have a look at my ebook for a more extensive list. Glutamine containing foods. Glutamine is super healing for the gut, and studies show that this has been super beneficial for reducing those levels of intestinal permeability and improving the gut integrity lining. Omega-3s, super important, anti-inflammatory, found in fatty fish. You can also use flaxseed oil, chia oil, although they're not as well converted as just using your omega-3 fatty fish. Probiotics, of course. I recommend using probiotics potentially after you've done that month 30-day challenge. Prebiotic fibers are going to be super important to feed and nourish that good bacteria, and you want to be looking for a diverse range of fibers, so not only in lots of colorful fruits and veggies, but things like slippery elm powder are great. Ground flaxseed is one of my favorites, and psyllium husk is also awesome. There's a few prebiotic fibers that you can buy if you're really set off or get really bloated by eating anything FODMAPy, and that's partially hydrolyzed gore gum, or there is acacia gum, and you can probably find those at your health food store. But your gut bugs love to eat them. They flourish they produce beneficial short chain fatty acids after eating those, and those short chain fatty acids nourish and feed your actual colonic cells. So really important there. I've popped a couple of recipes into the ebook, so have a look at those. I've got a gut healing smoothie and a gut healing kitchery for you guys, containing lots of lovely collagen and nutrients that you can use to heal your gut. Let's see, glutamine, yeah, nutrients that you can take. So while you're doing gut healing, you may be on this FODMAP diet or a paleo diet. Just remember that this is quite a restricted way of eating, the FODMAP diet, and you need to be doing some gut healing at the same time so that you can introduce foods down the track. So nutrients that can help to speed up the healing of that gut lining. My favorite, of course, I've already mentioned it, is glutamine. You can take around 2 to 5 grams of that. Some people take up to 30, but work your way up slowly to that. Zinc carnosine is a really beneficial nutrient to heal those little junctions between the colonic cells. Quercetin, which is a fantastic antihistamine. Vitamin D, essential for stabilizing that immune system. Turmeric, again, you can take in a high dose capsule, which will help to provide those antioxidants and polyphenols, and also anti-inflammatory. So really beneficial all around as turmeric. You're going to have that every day in your diet. Digestive enzymes can be very useful if you're very reactive and bloat or feel nauseous with everything. So people with intestinal permeability don't tend to have great absorption of nutrients. So taking some enzymes while you're working on healing this can really help you absorb more of the food that you're having. Lifestyle interventions. So yes, healing the gut does take a few different types of healing. It's not just taking one pill. There is going to be some lifestyle change. So sometimes it's simple, like chew your food. I know it sounds really simple, but I've been catching myself recently just eating at my desk really quickly, and then it's almost like, yeah, you get bloated and your high-waisted jeans start, like digging in. So chew your food nice and slowly, because this will induce the rest and digest nervous system. The one that, the parasympathetic nervous system, that is the relaxed nervous system. So make sure you chew your food and you're eating mindfully, and this will go a long way to help your body produce its own hydrochloric acid and enzymes so that it can break down your food properly. Sounds like a no-brainer, right? Make sure you're getting good sleep. Of course, this could be difficult. Make sure that you're managing your stress. Now, I went into stress management a bit in last month's lockdown guide. I'm not going to do it again, but do the things you need to do to manage your stress. And sometimes this is going to mean changing your job. Sometimes this is going to mean starting a new movement practice. Whatever you need to do, manage your stress. This will have a massive impact on your gut. Eat seasonally and eat organically if possible. Obviously, it's not possible for everybody, but if you can just get maybe half of your food organic, this will help to mitigate some of that organophosphates that we get from those commercially produced fruits and foods and vegetables and wheats and things. Now, as a herbalist, we have access to some fantastic liquid herbs that can heal the gut. Of course, work with a practitioner or a herbalist like myself, and this will really supercharge your healing time. But you can also make some teas or look up for some powdered herbs. I love to make, for gut healing, a root tea, and this is burdock root, licorice root, and marshmallow root. So boil them up together for about 10 minutes, keep it boiling, and then drink 2 to 3 cups of that a day. It's very nourishing, soothing, vulnerary for the gut. Other herbs that you can consider, pomegranate is a beautiful gut modulator. As I said, I've said turmeric before, and things like fennel and cinnamon are awesome. Also, herbs such as oregano, parsley, coriander, rosemary that contain volatile oils help to keep some of those pathogens from overgrowing. So you can use those in your everyday cooking. All right, so that's nutrition, nutrients, lifestyle, and food. I will wrap up there, but just a little reminder, how long does it take to heal? Well, that depends on the severity of your symptoms. So you most likely didn't get here overnight. And naturopathically, we like to say for every year that you've had your condition, it might take a month to heal. So it may take a little time because your body is learning how to heal itself. This does take a bit of time, but it lasts, it's long lasting, and as soon as you start doing this work, you should start to see that your food intolerances and your signs and symptoms start to reduce. That said, things can be tricky. There could be more underlying symptoms that I haven't mentioned here. But if you feel like you've just got a couple of food intolerances and your gut maybe isn't quite right, check out my ebook, Start the 30-Day Paleo Plan, and take some of the herbs and nutrients and lifestyle suggestions that I've put in there. And good luck. You can heal yourself. Feel free to email me and let me know how you're going, if you have found this useful, or if you have any questions. I'm also here to support you as a practitioner. If you'd like more in-depth support, book a one-on-one appointment with me. I'm online, so I can see you anywhere in Australia. Lots of love and good luck with it all. Bye now.